Welcome to Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy, the podcast where insights and innovation meet. Every episode, we dive into conversations with industry leaders, experts, and change makers, bringing you the stories and ideas in the renewable energy sector that shape our world. And now, let's jump into today's episode with your host, Wes Ashworth. Welcome back to Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy. Today, I'm joined by someone who has helped shape the backbone of clean energy infrastructure across the U.S. My guest is Sohan, Vice President of Renewable Energy at EVS Inc., one of the most trusted engineering service providers in the solar and storage space. Since joining EVS in 2014, Sohan has grown the company's renewable division from a fledgling idea into a 200-person powerhouse responsible for over 28 gigawatts of solar and 6 gigawatt hours of energy storage projects nationwide. In today's conversation, we'll explore how he helped build EVS's solar and storage group from the ground up, what it takes to lead with purpose and scale in a rapidly evolving industry, and why better education, documentation, and AI-assisted design might just be the keys to unlocking the next chapter of clean energy. We'll also talk about the challenges most developers overlook, from operations and maintenance gaps to the hidden impact of mid-project changes, and why community, service, and mentorship remain at the core of Sohan's leadership philosophy. Whether you're deep in the trenches of renewable project development or just curious about the gears turning behind the renewable energy industry, this one's packed with insights you won't want to miss. Sohan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Wes. It's an honor to be here and really appreciate your friendship. And thank you for the invite. I'm really excited for our discussion today.
Yeah, honestly, it's the pleasure is mine. I've been really excited for this one. We had some great conversations leading up to this and excited to jump into it. And let's start kind of at the beginning. How did your journey into renewable energy begin, and what first sparked your passion for solar?
Yeah. Well, going really back into my background, I grew up in India, in a small city called Guwahati, India. Did actually my bachelor's not in engineering. A lot of people would think so, but I actually did my bachelor's in architecture. But then I always had an eye towards sustainability and green design. So when I completed my bachelor's, I started looking for, what can I do when it comes to sustainable architecture? And I found University at Buffalo, New York, had some courses.
Yeah.
And I had, gave my GRE and I applied to the program. And there are a few other schools in the US that had programs as well. India at that time didn't have those programs. Now they do. But yeah, so I got accepted at Buffalo, came over here, completed my master's. And then when I completed my master's in 2009, about 16 years ago, we didn't have any jobs when it was peak recession, and we didn't have any jobs in the sustainable architecture, green buildings industry. So luckily, I found a company called Safari Energy based out of New York. They had an internship. I looked at it. I had some good background with doing AutoCAD design and production modeling for buildings. So that kind of somewhat transferred over to doing production modeling for solar and doing a lot of AutoCAD designs for PV. So, we're just a very small group at that time joined, and, they were doing a lot of commercial real estate, big malls and the REITs basically.
Okay. Yeah.
And they were doing solar for those REITs. So ended up joining there, worked there for a couple of years, moved around just a little bit. I always wanted to do bigger scale projects. Like, to me, bigger scale is faster impact, right? And I'm all about how can you put more renewable energy into the grid quicker, right? So I worked for Wanzek Construction, a very well-known EPC, for a little bit as well. But then really I joined EVS in 2014. So that became my real calling at the end of the day. And at that time, EVS was, doing more so commercial civil engineering work, a lot of work for the military. So we had a lot of good experience across the country, but we didn't do any solar. And then Dennis came, who is the chairman of the board. He's a true visionary. He was always looking into the renewable energy market, starting with wind and then solar. So when I met Dennis and Andy, the two owners, I kind of figured out they have a really good long-term vision for the company and something I could align with. So it worked out really well. And we had some relationships in the industry. And, we are lucky that I joined and we kind of started directly with the utility scale solar. And it was very unique at that time. End of 2014 is when I joined, but 2015 we started working on our first project, and they were like 100 megawatt project in Alabama, but using 1500 volt system, GE 4 megawatt inverters, Shoals, their harnesses were brand new at that time. And then also Next Tracker with their new tracker system at that time was
Yeah.
very unique. And so it gave us a lot of good experience, a lot of learning opportunities as well. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been here for 11 years and a lot of fun stories to talk about in those 11 years as well. But that's how I kind of got my intro into solar, and how I kind of navigated my way through starting in India and then coming to the US. And I'm here now with my family, and it's been a great experience, great ride.
Yeah, I love that. I love those journeys that are just kind of like, it's a little bit unplanned and unscripted, right? But it all works out and you end up in the right place. And that it's just really cool always to see that and see those passions align, and it happened that way. As you mentioned, we talked about you've been with EVS for over a decade. Share a little bit of the story, just how you helped launch the solar division and grow it into what it is today.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, just the beginning of my solar story here at EVS, but obviously I had a lot of good coworkers, partners, clients, and there has been a lot of good inflection points during the way as well. So, obviously starting with solar, we dive straight into utility scale solar.
Okay.
But then we got quite involved in community solar market as well in Minnesota. So we're doing both utility scale and community solar right off the gates. A good inflection point for us, when it comes to the growth journey, happened in 2017 when we started doing battery storage as well. And at that time, we have been very lucky, and being at the right place at the right time is so important in these kind of things, right? So we got a chance to work on one of the largest co-op owned battery storage projects here in Minnesota at 38 megawatt hours at that time. I think it was built in 2018. We started doing some engineering in 2017. So at that time, still very early, and like lithium iron phosphate batteries, which was, again, at that time, we just cobbled together like, hey, we didn't have the Fluences of the world or the Powens of the world, but we had an enclosure manufacturer from factory in Michigan, and then we had these batteries from China, and we kind of put it all together and just created a system, integrated system at that time. So that was a good inflection point for us and kind of helped, I would say, helped us get into the rocket ship of batteries as well. Yeah. Although we did see a big shift to utility scale batteries right after COVID. So we kept doing a lot of kind of smaller battery projects in 18, 19, 20 almost. Another inflection point was as we kept adding disciplines. So EVS was historically a civil and survey company.
Yeah.
So we have always been doing civil and survey, and the company is 46 years old. But we added electrical in 2014. So that was an inflection point. Then 2019, we added structural. So that became another push towards becoming a one-stop shop. So
sure.
That's how we pride ourselves to be a one-stop shop especially for EPC clients. And for, the audience like EPCs, engineering, procurement, and construction groups. So they are some of our major clients. And then after COVID was another, obviously we saw a little bit of downturn during COVID. Yeah. But then, the leadership, Dennis and Andy, along with our leadership team, we had the vision of saying like, hey, we are going to hold on to our people. We are not going to downsize. This will come back, right? And that really paid dividends in 2021. When the work came roaring back, and we were extremely busy in 2021. And since then, we got really another jump. And we ended up adding substation design early 2021. Okay. End of 2021, we added geotech capabilities. And then 22, 23, just last year, we added SCADA capabilities. Yeah. And then January of 2025, we added transmission engineering capabilities as well. So yeah, it's been just a great ride. Yeah. And just a lot of different inflection points on the way, which really helped us catapult to where we are today.
Absolutely. No, it's incredible. And it's clear your journey has been both personal and transformational for EVS. Now we looked at how things began. I want to shift gears and talk about how you've helped steer that growth, both as a leader and a culture setter. So starting out, EVS has grown, as we mentioned, from 30 to over 200 employees since you joined, which is incredible growth. Any other kind of key inflection points in that journey? You definitely shared most of those there in the timeline, but anything else that comes to mind in that growth trajectory?
Yeah, I think acquiring the right clients at the right time was important, right? We did start with utility scale jobs, but to really cement ourselves in the utility scale space, we had to bring in some of the skills. Adding good hydrology capabilities was important. Adding
Yeah.
good power studies capabilities was very important. And then also, as we kept adding, we always try to listen to our clients' feedback. We don't try to
Mhm.
do things in vacuum. So when we heard that, a one-stop shop approach is very much desired,
Yeah.
the way we added our capabilities, we saw like, okay, more clients come in, and some of the important clients come in, um, and also like we are doing a lot of work for developers as well now. Some, in addition to all the inflection points I mentioned, getting those strategic clients at that right time throughout our journey was very important for us too.
Without a doubt. The other piece of that is just fostering a culture of innovation and purpose, especially while you're scaling rapidly in such a dynamic industry such as this. So, how do you do that? How did you do that? And how do you continue to foster that culture of innovation and purpose?
Yeah, a lot of it goes down to our culture itself.
Yeah.
And Andy is a big part of it. He's our president. And, obviously I support Andy with everything when it comes to culture, but he really kind of takes the lead on setting the tone for the company when it comes to culture. Also working with the HR team, but we are a very transparent organization. So we do our annual strategic planning. We talk about, what things we should focus on for the future, but also how can we improve our current work through innovation and all of that. And we share that with our company. We
Yeah.
share that going to a directors group. So they will, based on our strategic plan for the next 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, they will create their own plans based off of that. And, we will talk a little bit about AI and automation. And so
Mhm.
that's one of the things we are looking into is really improving our automation and how to integrate AI into some of the work that we do. But yeah, we do share that with our company so that we are all aligned on the vision, but
Yeah.
also all aligned on the strategy as well. So
Sure.
once we do that, share that high level strategy with our people, we don't have too many people kind of trying to do something that is not, moving in the same direction, all of us
Yeah.
pushing in the same direction. So that transparency really helps.
Absolutely. That's good stuff. Overall, so thinking about the culture, what kind of people thrive at EVS in that growing dynamic environment? And then how do you attract talent in such a competitive space?
Yeah. So that's actually an easy one for me to answer because we have talked about it so much.
Yeah.
And it goes down to our core values. So we very carefully selected our core values and people, and our core values are respect, humility, integrity,
Hmm.
and then service excellence and continuous improvement.
Yeah.
So, we have like narratives for every single one of them. I won't go through every single one of them, but
Sure.
when people interview at EVS, we talk about all of our core values. Sometimes, obviously, we screen people for their technical acumen
Mhm.
and aptitude, but then the core values part, we just tell them and we say, hey, if you align with it,
Yeah.
you're in the right place. If you don't align with it, maybe EVS is not the place for you, right?
Yeah.
So what we have seen is it aligns with a lot of people, especially people who are trying to get into renewables industry. Hear these core values, they are like, this totally aligns with our core values. And obviously people talk to their peers or they will, we have people who have even worked at EVS and then gone somewhere else, you
Right.
know, typically they would still really stand behind, what we are as a culture, as a company.
Yeah.
Word gets around, right? So I
Absolutely.
think we have been able to, create a good reputation, good brand for ourselves in the industry, and that really helps bring in the talent.
Yeah. It's incredible. I love it. It is so cool how really, as you just said, when you really know your core values
Uh-huh.
and you stick by them, you talk about them a lot, you have those stories to support them, as you said, and even talking about that really openly with candidates through the interview process and throughout, you're right. People self-eliminate, a lot of times,
Yeah.
or they're really drawn in. Even more so, and like, oh my gosh, that's me. I want to be a part of that. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it's really really cool. Scaling a company while maintaining a strong culture is really no small feat. It's very difficult to do, but also the technical challenges in the field are just as complex. And so let's zoom in on some of the engineering hurdles you faced and what you're seeing across the industry. So one of the things you mentioned documentation gaps, especially
Uh-huh.
with international vendors and their impact on field work. Talk to us about that. What needs to improve across the industry?
Yeah, this one is specific to battery storage. Solar, obviously, we have been doing it for many, many years now. Things have quite a bit standardized at this point. Battery storage is still new. So we see a lot of international vendors coming in. And sometimes what we are seeing missing is like proper documentation or even kind of understanding of NEC, understanding of UL standards, especially if they don't have a whole lot of engineers in the US.
Yep.
They would send over their documentation to the owners and we'll start reviewing them and we're like, oh, we are missing these information. So in fact, we ended up helping some of those international vendors as well, creating their installation manuals, creating their documentation, QCing their, if they meet NEC codes or UL listing or not. But we had to go through that first, right?
Yeah.
To go through that pain first to say, like, even our clients, sometimes the developers or the EPCs, they ended up telling some of the vendors that, hey, why don't you use EVS, who are engineers, to help you improve your documentations?
Sure.
But it's obviously getting better, and
Uh-huh.
all the companies are the new entrants always, obviously struggle, and especially if they are foreign vendors. But the ones who are already established, they have already gotten much better, and we see that standardization happening in battery storage right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And another hot topic has been balancing grading versus pile strength. What's the real trade-off there? And should developers understand better? And maybe give a little bit of context in terms of, if somebody's not deeply entrenched in the industry, maybe they don't really understand what that means, but
Yeah.
give us a little bit of that.
One of the things, and this is not just EVS, but all engineering firms in the utility scale sector work on quite a bit, is value engineering. So obviously we have to engineer the project to meet codes and standards and to withstand whatever the PPA duration is, 25 years, 40 years. So we design it to those standards now. But then the challenge we get from our clients, which we always like to rise up to the challenge, is value engineering. Back when I started in solar, the discussion was all about electrical, right?
Yeah.
Because, like cable lengths, optimized cable lengths, low voltage, medium voltage, DC, AC, all of that. But a lot of them have been kind of vetted out and, moved towards standardization. So in the last 4 to 5 years, the focus has been more on civil and structural, is what we have seen. So obviously, we do a lot of work with trackers. And for those who don't know, we have to move a lot of dirt because trackers are like 300 feet long. So to kind of make sure they are, the sites that we get these days are not like flat and nice. They are like, they have a lot of topo, they have a lot of terrain. So to place those trackers, and these days they're terrain following trackers already. So that helps. In the past, it was more just straight trackers and you have to kind of grade the land and move them along.
Right.
But then you have to also balance it with pile lengths for structural. So that balancing act is very critical. And we work a lot with our EPC clients to understand, well, what is the right amount of value engineering we need to do here?
Yeah.
You move X amount of cubic yards, or you're going to increase the length by X feet. Which one is more economical? So we work very closely with them to understand what is economical. The exciting part that we are doing right now, and you'll see we are going to do a little bit of a marketing splash about it too in the near future, is our automated software tool that we have created especially for grading and pile lengths, like those two things. So I won't share the name yet on the podcast, but it'll come out very soon. But we have our own tool we developed using Python to really kind of do 50 iterations, 100 iterations, right? And in a very short amount of time to give you all these options, like this is going to be your amount of cubic yards of grading you'll need versus this is the pile length that you might need. And so that's what our clients like, is a lot of options. And then they have the actual pricing of the material. We don't have the pricing of the material, but then at least they got the information to make their best decision moving forward.
Just make an informed decision, really have all the options laid out. I mean, that's the important piece of it. Another component, so O&M, or operations and maintenance, is often overlooked. What are the most common issues you're seeing post-construction, and better questions, how can they be prevented?
Yeah, so that's definitely been a Achilles heel for, I can speak for ourselves, but I'm sure it's others have seen in the industry too, is especially when projects switch hands. We design it per the specs of our clients, who are the EPCs, and the developers, we look at their specs as well. So we make sure that we are meeting their specs. Quite often, the part that sometimes get overlooked is the O&M part, right? And we'd engineer for whatever seeding is needed and we'll spec it out, right? But somebody has to do that right amount of seeding and right amount of maintenance, and to also let that seeding grow, right? So sometimes when the project switches hands, somebody sold it to somebody else, they might miss that part. And we have seen that happen quite often. And then problems occur, and then we talk about it, right? Like, hey, what happened? And we talk about, okay, we did put it in our drawings, somehow this got missed, or somehow this is not followed. And sometimes it's also like just understanding, right? In some cases, there could be, let's say water on site. Like if a site is extremely flat, it might be
Yeah.
acceptable to have certain level of water on the site when you get certain amount of rain, like 100-year storm or 500-year storm.
Right.
Our most important job is to protect the equipment. And that's something we negotiate with our clients, right? But then when somebody else buys the project, they might look at it and are not happy. And they're saying, well, why is there standing water on site, right? And
Yeah.
obviously we need to meet all codes and regulations, but some of it is acceptable and some of it is already negotiated, right? But sometimes the end owner is coming into it a little bit cold and they're a little bit surprised to see that. So a lot of education is needed when it comes to those kind of issues. And I think just a lot of due diligence is needed. These are the O&M practices that the current owner and the future owner needs to collaborate and maintain and make sure these are happening, right? So that nobody's surprised later on.
Yeah. You mentioned standing water one. Are there other kind of common ones you see pop up a lot where something is missed or these issues pop up later down the road?
Erosion and scour. I'm not a civil engineer, but
Yeah.
obviously being in those discussions quite a bit, erosion issues or sometimes and scour issues, they do come up. Yeah, especially when it comes to O&M practices and later on in the stages. So definitely solid engineering is needed, making sure adhering to those engineering specs that construction is needed. And then
Yeah.
we need those three pieces of the stool or else it's not gonna stand, right? So
Right.
the third one is being O&M, proper O&M practices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And as we talk through some of those technical pain points, it's clear many of them stem from deeper issues, especially around education, shared understanding. And I want to dive into kind of knowledge gaps that you're often bridging and how the industry is evolving in response. So you have talked about the need for better education in the industry. What are the top things you find yourself sort of explaining over and over to clients or partners?
Obviously like the erosion, hydrology related things that we have to explain. Also like on the electrical side, right? Like what is appropriate value engineering versus what is making sure that everything is safe when it comes to grounding, when it comes to ampacity. So
Yeah.
we do a lot of education with our clients on that. And our clients are very reasonable people. We are able to explain them well
Yeah.
why these things need to be done. And obviously, we have to pay very close attention to value engineering. They do understand the need for some of these. Sometimes it might be like, why are we using so many grounding rods? Or
Yeah.
those discussions come up, right? So, and we are able to, we try to do a good job of explaining the reasoning behind it. And I think something that all engineering companies can do more is just general education for the industry. And part of me being here in this
Yeah.
podcast, hope, if some of our clients or some of our industry peers here, this also helps them.
Absolutely. And one of the other things we touched on was just the impact of mid-project changes. And I wanted to dig into that a little bit. So how can developers better understand the true impact of those mid-project changes, like swapping out modules or on timelines and budgets and just what that impact looked like?
Well, modules never change, do they?
Never.
That's a running joke. When we talk to our clients and we talk about it, they say, "Yeah, when was the last time we changed a module on a project?"
Yeah, exactly.
It
Right.
was yesterday.
Uh-huh.
So I guess some of the education that needs to happen on that means we obviously totally understand, and our
Yeah.
clients are fair, right? Like when modules change, we have to do rework. They're very fair people, and we get change orders. But what actually strains the work is the perception of how quickly this can be turned around, right? Like
Yeah.
we change a module. Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of downstream effects, right? Like
Right.
sometimes we have to not only redo the layout, but rerun some studies. We have to look at grading, all the aspects. It's just not one discipline that is being impacted. It's multiple disciplines. And so sometimes clients might think that it should take 2 weeks, what in reality it will take 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Obviously, we are always trying to make sure we are staying very competitive when it comes to schedule without compromising quality. Some of that, this is a kind of a phenomenon that occurs all the time that we have to explain why this is going to take so much time, because there's a lot of domino effect things that happens with module changes, inverter changes, or any component that changes, or even like, if they miss something in the alter survey and all of a sudden we find out there's like 4 of these wells that were not caught in the survey, and then
Yeah.
the layout changes and everything changes. There is a lot of domino effect that goes on with it.
Absolutely. And just evolution of the industry. So you've mentioned that hydrology is now getting tackled earlier in the process. I guess why is that so important, and how's that changed project outcomes?
Yeah, it is extremely important because it's always a chicken and egg situation, right?
Yeah,
Because, you know, in the past, it's a very noble effort. Like, let's try to spend the least amount of money possible to get this project interconnected and permitted
right.
before construction starts. Now, well, there is investment in the industry and there is more education. So now
Mhm.
people are trying to really kind of right size how much engineering needs to be done on the front end. And hydrology became a really big topic. Obviously we need an auto survey, we need geotech, but hydrology will really allow us to understand like where to put the panels, right? So
Yeah,
it's a part of creating a buildable area map. It's a part of creating a constraints map. If we don't do, hydrology will tell us the elevation of the water, right? After a 100-year rain or 500-year storm. And that's becoming more and more common. We are seeing like back-to-back 500-year storms in 2 years
yeah,
sometimes in some areas, right? So that topic has become such a hot topic. And if we don't know the elevation of the water in certain locations, we are not able to design, and we cannot wait until 90% to do the hydrology study because
right. Yeah,
we would have done all of our design by that time. Then somebody says, oh, you shouldn't be putting your panels here. Then we have to do the redesign. So the good
yeah,
news is that not a huge dollar item to tackle on the front end. So
sure.
I think our clients or developers are really understanding the value of just getting it done at the front end so that if there's an issue later on, we don't have to. And even more important than redesign, it's a time lost, right? Because now we'll need another 4 to 6 weeks to just do the design again, right? Because we
Yeah.
didn't done a hydrology study. So that would hurt them a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So education, which we covered a bit of that there, is part of the equation, but innovation's moving really fast too. Let's talk about where the puck is headed. So, what new technologies are catching your eye, and how are they reshaping how we think about project design and delivery? And kind of to that, so looking ahead, what technologies or trends are you most excited about, whether it's long duration storage, green hydrogen, AI assisted engineering, or anything else?
Yeah. So that's a lot of things packed into
Yeah.
one sentence, but I'll break it down into what we are doing with AI and automation.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about what the future markets are looking like, at least from our perspective.
Mhm.
So when it comes to AI and automation and these innovations, we actually break it down into two specific buckets. One is automation that is really kind of improving our processes through softwares like Python or
Yeah.
Fortran um, and we look at all disciplines, like how can we deliver our layouts better, quicker, faster, like standardize our wire schedules. Also, like as I mentioned, for grading and pipelines, using Python to develop our own tool in-house to do multiple iterations so that we can give a lot of options to our clients. That all falls in that automation bucket.
Yeah.
Kind of really, it's not just to reduce time, which it does reduce time, but it's also to provide a lot more value. You know, in the past we could have provided like 10 options. Now we can provide 50 options, right? If
Yeah.
that's what they need, right? So that's really the automation part. When it comes to the AI part, we are working on some initiatives we have not put as much effort ever in the past. And we would Raj Pawar, who used to lead our PV and BEST group in the past, but now he is in charge of automation. Basically, he's the director of client management and innovation. So
Yeah.
innovation is a big part of what he does. So we're working with some external groups and all of that to create our own AI platforms to really help with engineering. Obviously, keeping in mind quality as number one, table stakes, right? Like
Yeah.
whatever we do, we cannot compromise quality. And then second is, yes, hopefully they will really not only improve our quality, but again, we can check so many things, right? From many different angles using AI to really kind of assist our engineers. And that engineering judgment will always be needed because we
Right.
cannot ask AI to be a PE. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
somebody has to take the liability, which should
Yeah.
be us, right? As the engineer of record. But AI will really be there as a co-pilot, as a lot of people say,
Uh-huh.
right? To assist our engineering needs.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to what technologies we see in the future, I am a big proponent of long duration battery storage, like long duration solutions, right? Like
Right.
our industry just needs more of them. We do have a really good solution with short duration with lithium ion. Prices have really come down. Now it might go up a little bit because of tariffs, but
Yeah.
overall, when you compare pricing from 2019 to now, it's not even a comparison. It has really plummeted. So even with tariffs, I think it'll be still competitive. But then long duration, like you know, I would love to see more investments in green hydrogen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really kind of generating that power through solar and wind, if
Yeah.
possible, right? And for green hydrogen, I love the iron air solutions, farm energy. I really liked some of the neat at one time, like vanadium flow solutions for flow batteries. And there are other solutions out there for flow batteries as well. One of my really technology that I really liked is by Energy Vault. And that's where they have basically they use energy to pull a concrete block up an elevator, right? And then when it comes down, it generates energy in the night or whenever you need it. I would love to see those kind of technologies become really cost competitive, and like if we can deploy them everywhere, that'll be amazing. Obviously, I don't know exactly how much they cost, but such a neat idea. And if we can make it very commercial, that'll be amazing. Yeah, a lot of neat solutions out there. We are always keeping our eye out for which one becomes like a runaway winner, and we want to be in that industry.
Right.
So we
Yeah.
always keeping an eye out for that.
Yeah, no question. There's some really interesting technologies coming out, and just seeing how quickly it's evolving too. But yeah, I actually had a previous episode with Rob Piconi from Energy Vault, so I'll notate that in the show notes as well too, to go check that out.
Yeah.
Any other sort of technologies or sectors that you think maybe the industry isn't paying enough attention to, or things that deserve a little bit more attention?
Well, carbon capture is one. Right? Like if, carbon capture is tied a lot to fossil fuels right now, but there's also like direct air capture technology that's out there, right? So, it doesn't have to be tied to any fossil fuels, but I think I don't remember the exact country, but one of the Nordic countries, Norway or Finland, they implemented a direct air capture facility, but those facilities can be powered through solar and wind, right? And lithium-ion batteries. So again, I'm not an expert in that particular regard, but something I think of that if you're able to make energy so cheap, right? And it doesn't matter at what time of the day you are capturing energy. This is direct air capture. If you can get it to be affordable, and that'll be a game changer, I think.
Yeah, no, agreed. Another episode too with Aditya from DAC Lab is on the show as well too, if you want to check that out and learn more about direct air capture.
I certainly will.
It's an interesting topic. It really is. And I think the more you look at too, now we're looking at this energy expansion and the demand growth, and those stats are like 16% growth and things like that. I think it's going to have to be a part of the equation, or most likely will be. So there's obviously a lot to be excited about, a lot of new technologies, a lot of changes happening. Zooming out a little bit, the big question remains, where is the renewable energy truly headed? Where's the market headed? So let's take a broader look of the industry's current state and what the near future holds. So there's always a lot of noise in the media, both hype and doom. But from your vantage point, you're in it, you're sitting in a company, you're helping grow, you're helping scale a company, you're seeing it day in and day out. What's the real story right now from your perspective?
Yeah. So part of my job at EVS is to really look at the strategic initiatives of EVS and what markets we are going to be in. And I read a lot of SIA and Wood Mackenzie reports and, DNV reports, all other reports as well. What we have seen is, the solar industry really did really well in 2014. We had this hockey stick curve.
Yeah.
But right now, mostly due to interconnection challenges, things are kind of flattening out. I hope with data centers, there's a lot of energy coming in, and we'll still be adding a lot more solar. But there's a little bit of, we won't see that hockey stick curve anymore. But to put it into perspective, I think last year we added 65% of new generation added to the grid was solar, right? Yeah. So when you think about it from that perspective, that's huge, right? Exactly. And if we continue to maintain that, adding 50 to 60% of new energy into the grid as solar, it's a pretty darn good industry. So I think we'll keep doing that for the next 10 years. But then we also have to just look internationally, right? There's so much happening, so much more to do internationally when it comes to solar. And then, with the combination of wind and battery storage, it's still a very neat solution. I was listening to one of the podcasts that talked about when you combine solar and wind together, right? Let's say if we look at historical data in California for 10 years, you already see there's a base load, right? Nobody considers that as a base load, but there is a base load. When you co-locate solar and wind in, let's say, one state, you look at data for 10 years, you'll see there certainly is, a good amount of base load created right there. Now you add batteries, then that base load starts becoming bigger and bigger. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
If we can look at data from 10, 15, 20 years, we can say now we can actually really rely on this base load because it has never dipped under this level for the last 10, 15 years. So
Right.
this is real stuff. So hopefully we can decongest the grid a little bit through more transmission build out. And
Yeah.
again, that's another whole podcast topic, that permitting is a big challenge there, right? So
Yeah.
if we can deregulate some of that permitting needs and add more transmission to the grid, we'll be able to add more wind and solar. But it is somewhat limited because of really interconnection clogging right across the board here in the country. So if that changes, I think solar can still do that upward curve when it comes to like more gigawatts being installed each year.
Yeah, absolutely. And just anything to add there in terms of what's your outlook for the rest of 2025 and beyond, and specifically too, like how are you positioning EVS to stay ahead of the curve?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not living under a rock, everybody knows some of the headwinds that are going
Yeah.
on with tariffs and the AD/CVD tariffs and the Liberation Day tariffs and all that's going on. So when that happens, obviously people get cautious and make sure to really think twice about the investment. So we are still growing, which is good in this particular market, and
Yeah.
will continue to grow. But just have to be very careful about, especially this year, right? Just looking at how things pan out when it comes to tariffs. And then once the tariff dust is settled to some extent, I think then the developers will keep pushing on their projects, and then so will the EPCs, and so we will as well. But just a little uncertain next 3 to 6 months, but hopefully the dust will settle after that, and then we can kind of continue our trajectory of growth after that.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm optimistic. I think that'll definitely happen. This industry is kind of like just one of the most resilient industries there is, and just and they call it solar coaster for a reason. And you have these ups and downs and these challenges and these other external factors that really come into play. But yeah, like you said, once the dust settles, really smart people sort of get to work and start innovating, creating, and figuring out a way. Demand's not going anywhere. I think the push is not going anywhere, so it'll happen. It's just timing. So amidst all the complexity of scaling business, forecasting trends, it's easy to forget that human side of leadership. And I do think it's so important. So before we wrap up, I want to bring things back to just your personal values and the impact you're making beyond just leading and beyond the boardroom. So some of those things, like you've done volunteer solar installs and supported organizations like Habitat for Humanity and Children International. What role does service play in your life and in leadership overall?
Yeah, it's so important. And I'm really lucky to be a part of an organization like EVS that really values community service. We as a company, we do a lot of feed my starving children during Christmas. So it's definitely keeps us grounded, right? And we have a foundation called EVS Cares here at EVS, and we have all kinds of activities sometimes to, like, we do October. People will count their steps, and then steps will be converted to dollars, and that dollars will be donated to your organized charitable organization of choice, right? And it's also such a good thing, like for our kids, right? Because my kids are 8 and 5, so they're in a few years I'd love to kind of take them to feed my starving children when they can do that work, especially the 5-year-old. And we'd like to do that as family, and that will also keep them grounded, right? Because they have seen a life that is somewhat comfortable, but they should get to know what others in the world face as well. And that will, gratitude is important, right? So I think they will learn from that experience and develop that attitude of gratitude.
Absolutely. It's so important. And I love just the service that's so true to who you are in your heart, and giving back and making a difference, and not just business, not just the industry, but really as a whole, and making the world a better place. I love that. Another question I want to put out there. So what advice would you give to young professionals or professionals entering the space who really want to make a real impact in the renewable energy space?
Yeah. The good news is that I haven't had to really sell that as much to young people. Like, we have seen people coming from these really good schools, and they're already like very much into renewables, very much into solar battery storage. The advice I'll give them, yes, follow your passion, right? And be inquisitive, follow your passion. The more important advice I would give is to, people who are somewhat skeptical of renewable energy, like, hey, is this going to do this or that? So the important thing is, like, most of the world moves in the right direction generally. Like when you look from 18th century, 17th century, right? So you might have some ups and downs, but renewable energy thing is the right thing to do. So it doesn't matter if it's solar or if it's wind or if it's geothermal or if it's nuclear, right? So we have different forms of renewable energy. I would say believe in it, right? And find your way, right? Like solar might not work for you, but geothermal might, and that's fine, right? Nuclear might, and that's fine too, right? So yeah, so don't give up on renewable energy. I think is always going to be ways, and like even Fortune 500 organizations, they are looking not just 4 years, they're looking 20, 50 years down the line.
Yeah.
Everybody wants renewable energy for data centers because first thing, it's the right thing to do. Second, it's cheaper, right? So it makes twice the sense, right? So so have the faith, right? So we will, as a solar coaster, we sometimes do ups and downs, but generally it has always gone up.
Still headed up. Yeah, absolutely. No, great words of wisdom there, and piece of advice. Closing thoughts. Any other words of advice, things you want to wrap up with, things that you maybe didn't get to share that you would like to, just give you the floor. Anything else that we didn't cover?
No, I mean, just in general about the industry, right? Like it's a really fun industry to be a part of. Like I feel so lucky that I didn't go into some other industry. We have really good people in the industry, and that's what, I started my career really thinking about renewables, but then it ended up becoming all about the people, right?
Yeah.
And it's not at EVS, our clients, or even just when I go to trade shows, right? We just have a huge bunch of good people. So it's so much fun to work in this industry. So come work with us, right? Come work in this industry. That's what I'll say.
I love it. Great way to wrap up. So with that, we'll conclude the conversation today with Sohan Das, a true builder of systems, teams, and future forward solutions in the renewable energy space. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to Green Giants wherever you get your podcasts. Share it with someone who's passionate about clean energy and the people driving it forward. And with that, thanks for listening. Again, I'm Wes Ashworth, your host, and I'll catch you next time with another titan of the renewable energy movement.
This episode of Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy, was brought to you by Lee Group Search. If you enjoyed today's discussion and are looking to recruit top talent for your company or find your next career opportunity in the renewable energy sector, visit leegroupsearch.com. Let's continue driving the future of clean energy together. Until next time, keep pushing toward a greener future.